My name's Elizabeth. I teach science at a private school, and thanks to my folks having a bit of money, I've had a cushy life so far. But let's not get into that, it's not like I flaunt it. Every morning, before the sun gets too bold, I lace up my sneakers and hit the park trails for a run. There's this elderly lady, Mrs. Ramsey, who parks herself on the same bench every morning. She just sits there watching the lot of us run laps, like we're on some reality show. One crisp morning, as I slowed down for a breather near her usual spot, she called out to me. "Good morning. You're quite the regular, aren't you?" she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone her age. "Yeah, I try to be," I replied, wiping the sweat off my brow. "Helps me keep sane." She chuckled. "I bet it does. I'm Marjorie, by the way. Marjorie Ramsey." "Elizabeth," I said, stretching my legs a bit. "Nice to meet you, Marjorie." Marjorie patted the spot next to her. "Mind if I give you some company while you catch your breath?" I sat down, figuring a little chat wouldn't hurt. "Not at all. Do you come here just to watch us run?" "Partly," she admitted with a mischievous grin. "But I also like the fresh air, and I've been looking for someone." "Looking for someone? In the park?" I frowned, a bit puzzled. "Not like that, dear," she laughed. "I've been on the lookout for a suitable young woman." I raised an eyebrow. "Suitable for what exactly?" "For my son," she said bluntly. "He needs a good wife." I almost choked on my water. "Come again?" "You heard me," Marjorie said, her eyes scanning my face. "My son, he's a good man. Successful, kind, but terribly shy. I figured it's time he settled down." "And you're scouting in the park?" I couldn't help but laugh. It was bizarre, really. "If you see what I see, dear, you'd understand. Healthy, smart women in their prime. Like you," she explained, her gaze firm yet kind. I shook my head, still amused by the absurdity of it all. "So, what does this son of yours even think about his mom picking out girls for him?" Marjorie shrugged. "Michael trusts my judgment. He knows I just want him to be happy." I stood up, ready to continue my run. "Well, good luck with that, Marjorie. It was nice meeting you." As I jogged away, her words lingered in my mind. It was definitely one of the weirder conversations I'd had. Little did I know, that wouldn't be the last I'd hear from Marjorie Ramsey or her mysterious son. Curiosity got the best of me. After that strange chat with Marjorie about her son needing a wife, I couldn't shake off the peculiarity of it all. A month passed since our park bench recruitment session, and I received a casual invitation for dinner at her place. "Just a friendly dinner, with a bit of family," her message said. Why I agreed, I'll never know. Maybe I was just looking for a story to laugh about later with my friends. I dressed simple, but nice, figuring I'd blend in better if I didn't look like I was trying too hard. I drove over to the address she gave me, an old-fashioned house with a welcoming glow in the windows. Marjorie greeted me at the door with a warmth that felt genuine. "Elizabeth, I'm so glad you could make it. Come in, come in." The house was cozy, filled with the scent of something delicious. She led me into the dining room where a few people gathered around a large table. "Everyone, this is Elizabeth, the lovely young woman I met at the park." A man, who must have been her husband, stood up first, a big grin on his face. "Pleasure to meet you. I'm Harold, Marjorie's other half." Next to him, a younger man, clearly the son, extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Michael. Mom has told me quite a bit about you." His handshake was firm, his smile shy, but kind. I couldn't help but notice he wasn't what I expected. He seemed normal, nice even. And then a woman around my age, with a friendly face, came over with her arm extended. "I'm Anna, Michael's sister. And don't worry, we're not all in on this matchmaking scheme." Her tone was teasing, and I relaxed a bit, laughing with her. "Glad to hear it," I replied. We settled around the table, and the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Michael was a software developer, not the entrepreneur Marjorie had embellished him to be, and Anna worked as a graphic designer. As we ate, Marjorie couldn't help herself. Elizabeth teaches science at a private school, you know. Quite the brainy one. Mom, let's not start selling her credentials. Michael chuckled, his cheeks reddening a bit. The food was great, and the company was unexpectedly enjoyable. Michael was easy to talk to, his interests broad and his humor gentle. Anna was a riot, her sharp wit making me laugh more than I had in weeks. Michael helped clear the table, and I found myself helping, the two of us falling into an easy rhythm. Sorry about all this, he murmured as we stacked dishes in the kitchen. Mom means well, but she can be a bit much. It's fine, really. I've enjoyed getting to know everyone, I said honestly. As I drove home later that night, I reflected on the evening. It had been nothing like I expected. No pressure, just good food and good people. Maybe Marjorie was a bit unconventional in her methods, but her family was all right. The next day, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Michael. Hey, Elizabeth, he started, sounding a bit nervous. Would you like to meet up, just the two of us this time? Maybe at a cafe downtown? I was taken aback, but pleased. Yeah, that sounds great. We met up the next day, and without the family around, it was even easier to talk. We laughed a lot, shared stories, and before we knew it, a couple of hours had flown by. As we left the cafe, Michael said, I had a really good time today. Would you like to do this again? Definitely, I agreed, already looking forward to it. Driving home, I couldn't help but feel excited about what was next. Maybe Marjorie was onto something after all, even if her methods were a bit unconventional. After that coffee date with Michael, things just took off like a shot. We started seeing each other almost every other day. It wasn't anything fancy at first, just casual meetups after work, grabbing a bite or catching a movie. But it was clear, at least to me, that there was something there. Something that felt like it could turn into a lot more. One chilly evening, Michael picked me up from school. We drove out to the coast, which was his surprise plan to watch the sunset. It was pretty cold, but he brought along a thick blanket. We sat on the hood of his car, wrapped in the blanket, watching the sky change colors. It was quiet except for the sound of the waves and the occasional laugh from us. Suddenly, he turned to me, his face serious for once. Elizabeth, I've been thinking, he started, hesitating a bit. These past weeks with you have been, well, amazing. I'm not good with words, but I really like you. A lot. I smiled, feeling the warmth not just from the blanket but from what he was saying. I like you too, Michael. A lot. I mimicked his tone, and we both laughed. From then on, things just seemed to fall into place. We met each other's friends, and even though my pals were a bit skeptical at first, given how we met, they soon saw what I saw in him. Michael was straightforward, no airs about him. He liked simple things, a good burger, classic movies, and long walks. 6 months flew by, and every day felt a bit brighter than the last. I knew I was falling in love with him, not just because he was kind and funny, but because he made everything seem straightforward, no complications, just us. One evening, while we were having dinner at my place, Michael got unusually quiet. After a while, he took a deep breath, reached across the table, and held my hand. Elizabeth, these months with you, they've been the happiest of my life, he said, his voice steady but intense. I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? It wasn't a fancy proposal. No kneeling, no ring in the champagne. But it was real, it was sincere, and it was us. I didn't need a second to think it over. Yes, Michael. Absolutely, yes, I answered, my heart racing with joy. We got married quietly, just a small ceremony with family and a few friends. It was perfect, just like everything with him seemed to be. We moved into my apartment, merging our lives and belongings, which surprisingly took little effort. Settling into married life with Michael was like slipping into a comfortable rhythm we both seemed to naturally follow. Mornings were filled with quick coffees and kisses goodbye, evenings were for cooking together or sometimes just ordering in when we felt lazy. Life was good, simple, and happy. But just when I thought things couldn't get any better, I found out I was pregnant. The day I found out, I was a bundle of nerves. I waited for Michael to come home, the positive test clutched in my hand. When he walked through the door, looking tired from the day but smiling as soon as he saw me, I blurted it out. "Michael, we're going to have a baby." His face froze for a second, and then a cautious smile crept up. "Really? Wow, that's amazing, Liz." He hugged me, but there was a hesitancy in his voice that I hadn't expected. I brushed it off as shock. After all, it was big news. We told his parents the following weekend over dinner at their place. I thought they'd be over the moon, considering they'd dropped hints about grandkids since the day we got married. Marjorie's reaction was all smiles. "That's wonderful news, dear. Isn't that wonderful, Harold?" Harold just nodded, his usual chatty self somewhat subdued. "Yes, very good news." The enthusiasm seemed forced, and I caught Michael watching his father closely, a frown forming when he thought no one was looking. After we announced the pregnancy at a family dinner, everyone reacted more or less positively, except for Anna, who seemed visibly upset. I found a moment to talk to her after dinner. "Hey, Anna, you okay? You seemed a bit down earlier." She sighed, looking away before meeting my eyes. "It's just that. I can't have kids, Liz. Found out a while back. Even led to my divorce. It's tough seeing everyone else move on, you know?" Her confession hit me hard. Here I was, wrapped up in my own drama, not seeing her pain. I reached out, squeezing her hand. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I had no idea." She managed a small smile. "It's not your fault. I'm happy for you, really. Just takes me a bit to adjust sometimes." As my belly grew, so did the awkwardness around Michael's family. They were polite but distant, which was a stark contrast to their initial excitement about the potential for grandchildren. Michael himself was supportive but increasingly distant. His once warm cuddles now felt like he was holding back. Things got weirder with his parents too. The usual Sunday dinners became less frequent, and when we did go, Marjorie and Harold hardly asked about the pregnancy. They talked about everything else, Anna's new job, Harold's golf games, even the neighbor's landscaping, anything but the upcoming grandchild. During one particularly tense visit, I overheard Marjorie whispering to Michael in the kitchen. "Make sure everything's ready for the baby." Michael's reply was low, but I caught the tail end of it. "I know, Mom. I'm on top of it." What was there to be on top of? His vague, cryptic responses and the lack of enthusiasm were starting to wear me down. Giving birth to my son was the most surreal experience of my life. There he was, this perfect little human that Michael and I created, and he was all ours. But the bliss of becoming a mother got a rude awakening the very next day. It was early morning, not long after the nurses had shifted shifts, when one of them came into my room. She looked around quickly, a bit too nervously for a regular checkup. "I need to take him for some special procedures," she muttered, reaching for my son's crib. "Special procedures?" I echoed, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. "What kind of procedures?" No one mentioned anything about taking him away. She paused, her hands hovering over my baby. "It's just routine, ma'am. We need to run a few tests." I reached out, my instinct screaming at me to keep my baby close. "I'd like to see some kind of order for that." "Can you bring me the paperwork?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. The nurse blinked, taken aback. I'll be right back," she stammered, and hurried out, without my son. Something about that interaction didn't sit right with me. I pressed the call button for another nurse, wanting more answers, but before anyone came, the shift changed, and the atmosphere seemed to calm down. That night, however, the same nurse returned. It was late, the dim lights in my hospital room casting long shadows. She didn't see that I was still awake, my eyes barely closed. In her arms was another baby, not mine, and she was tiptoeing towards my son's crib. Adrenaline shot through me. Ignoring the pain in my body, I got up and confronted her. "What are you doing? Who's that child?" The nurse jumped, nearly dropping the infant she held. I got the rooms mixed up," she stammered, her face pale. "Rooms mixed up? Really? Twice in one day with the same baby?" I snapped, my heart racing. The baby in her arms began to cry, and the nurse quickly turned and left, almost running from my room. I was left shaking, clutching my son to my chest, too scared to let him go even for a second. Come morning, the whole incident felt like a nightmare. I called my mom, recounting the events, my voice trembling. "Sweetheart, it's probably just your hormones going wild. You just had a baby, it's normal to feel overprotective," she soothed. Was I being paranoid? No, something was wrong, but my exhausted mind struggled to piece it together. Later that day, I was discharged and went home. Michael was there, waiting for us. His reaction, however, was not what I expected. He looked at our son, his expression unreadable and distant. "Isn't he perfect?" I tried to break the ice, handing our son to him. "Yeah, sure," Michael responded flatly, his interaction lacking any warmth. I watched, a sinking feeling in my gut, as he handed our son back to me much too quickly. "I've got to catch up on some work," he muttered and disappeared into his home office. It's been a year since I brought my son into this world, a year that should have been filled with shared smiles and family warmth. Instead, it's been the most confusing and cold period of my life. Michael, who once promised to stand by me through everything, now spends most of his time at work. When he is home, it's like he's just a shadow passing through our lives, barely noticing his own son. The change wasn't sudden. It crept up on us, gradually, like a slow-moving storm cloud. I noticed it first when, despite all the excitement of his parents about having a grandson, they lost interest almost immediately after he was born. Their enthusiasm shifted in ways I couldn't understand. One afternoon, Anna, Michael's sister, dropped by with a toddler. She was glowing with a new kind of joy. "I adopted him," she told me, her eyes lighting up. "Mom suggested I look into adoption, and well, here he is." She introduced me to a bright-eyed little boy, who clung to her with shy curiosity. I was happy for her, truly, but I couldn't help but notice the lavish attention her son received from my in-laws. Toys, clothes, endless visits, Anna's son received everything. And my son? It was as if he didn't exist in their world. Michael didn't seem bothered by his parents' blatant favoritism. He spent whatever little time he had at home talking to Anna about her son, completely ignoring our child who yearned for just a fraction of that attention. I tried talking to Michael about it. One evening, after another dinner where Michael had excused himself early to work, I confronted him. "Michael, we need to talk. It's about our son," I started, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions inside me. "You've missed his first words, his first steps. You don't see him, Michael. And neither do your parents. What's going on?" Michael sighed, finally shutting his laptop with a snap. "Liz, you're making it into a bigger deal than it is. We're busy, that's all." "Too busy for your own son?" My voice cracked, the hurt too deep to mask. "Why do your parents shower Anna's son with affection and ignore ours?" "It's just different, Liz. Anna's situation is different." He was evasive, his words doing nothing to soothe the growing rift between us. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Anna's child received all the love and attention from his grandparents that my son should have been getting. It wasn't just the gifts. It was the visits, the cuddles, the photos taken and shared with pride. Meanwhile, my son's milestones went unnoticed, his achievements uncelebrated. I was fed up, truly exhausted from the constant coldness and secrets. It came to a head during a family dinner, which was as tense as ever. I was determined to have it out with Michael, to demand answers about why everything had turned so sour. Just as I was about to speak, Michael, to my shock, beat me to it. "I need to talk to you," he said flatly, his eyes avoiding mine. "Fine," I replied. "I have things to say too." Michael's next words hit me like a freight train. "I don't love you anymore, Liz. I don't need you." His voice was cold, emotionless. My heart skipped. What about your son? Our son? He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. I'm convinced you've been cheating. That kid isn't mine. His mother, sitting beside him, nodded her approval at his words. It was like a coordinated strike. Michael slid an envelope across the table. Here are the divorce papers. I'm filing for a paternity test. When it shows that kid isn't mine, I'll be asking for compensation for your betrayal. I was speechless, my mind racing. Accusations of infidelity? Demands for compensation? This wasn't just cold, it was brutal. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I've never been unfaithful, and I'll take your test. You'll see you're wrong. My voice was shaking, but I was furious. As I left, his mother hurled insults at me, words so vile they made me tremble with anger. I left their house, the echo of her slurs following me out the door. Back at my place, I called my mom, who was livid when she heard what happened. Remember that nurse incident at the hospital? Maybe it's time to dig deeper, she suggested. Taking her advice, I hired a private investigator and ordered a comprehensive DNA test, not just for Michael, but for his parents too. I needed to uncover everything, whatever the cost. A month later, armed with the results, I returned to face them. Michael, his sister, and her adopted son were all there, playing on the floor as if this was just another family gathering. His parents lounged on the couch, an air of smug satisfaction about them. Michael looked up with a sneer. Well, what did the test show? I opened the envelope, my hand steady, despite the pounding in my chest. The test shows a 99% probability of paternity. Michael, you are the father of our son. I let the words hang in the air, watching his face fall. And there's more, I continued, turning to his parents. Michael's mother is biologically related to our son. But Michael's father is not his biological grandfather. The room went silent. The color drained from his mother's face, she looked from me to her husband, who was now standing, his expression one of betrayal and fury. You, he shouted at her. I knew it. You've been lying for years. She started crying, her hands covering her face as she confessed to years of deceit. This is just the surface of it, I announced, my voice ringing clear and loud. There's an entire scheme orchestrated by none other than my mother-in-law, with the knowing participation of Michael. Marjorie devised a plan to avoid the expenses of surrogacy by ensuring her son married a suitable candidate, me. A wealthy, healthy woman, selected specifically to bear a child for the purpose of inheriting the family's fortune. I continued, the words tasting bitter. After my son was born, the next phase of their plan was to replace him with another child, a baby switched by a bribed nurse whom a private detective has since convinced to testify against you. Anna's eyes widened, her gaze flickering between her brother and her mother, betrayal written all over her face. And the cruelty didn't end there. This woman, I pointed directly at my mother-in-law, persuaded Anna to adopt a child she believed was mine, thinking she was raising her biological grandson. Anna's face crumpled, tears streaming down as she clutched the little boy closer to her chest. Her mother, my mother-in-law, had been sobbing moments before, her secrets exposed, her marriage crumbling. But at my accusation, she hardened, her tears drying as she turned to Anna. He's not ours, Anna. It's best if he goes back. But Anna shook her head, her voice breaking, but resolute. No, mother. He's my son. I love him, and I won't let him go, because of your mistakes. Because of your actions, Michael, and you will face the consequences, I declared, my resolve as firm as the gavel I imagined in my hand. I am suing for full custody of my son and for damages for the fraud attempted. You tried to steal my son and accuse me of infidelity, to strip me of everything. The court proceedings that followed were grueling but straightforward. Armed with irrefutable evidence and the testimony of the nurse, the judgment was swift. My mother-in-law received a sentence of 2 years for her role in the deception. Michael agreed to a settlement that included substantial financial support and alimony. As the judge pronounced the sentence, my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, a man betrayed and broken, filed for divorce, severing the last ties that bound him to the woman he had once loved. Now, I focus on raising him in a world filled with love and devoid of deceit. Anna and her son are frequent visitors to our home, the children playing together as we support each other in our new lives.